Welcome back, I'm Askar Sherlief and you're watching the news from Kazakhstan. The arrest of the opposition leader Vladimir Kozlov was extended on Monday for another month, following the petition of the national security investigator Osken Jasuzakov.
This time, investigator Osken Jasuzakov said that supposedly the results of the fifth examination are not ready yet, upon that they will conduct some investigative activities. According to the wife of the oppositionist Aliya Turuzbekova, the investigator systematically refuses to allow her to meet with her husband. This time inside the courtroom, replying to direct questions, Jasuzakov said that he is not responsible for making decisions over such issues. The judge listened to both sides and made a verdict to extend the arrest of Kozlov for another 4 months. The leader of the Alga party, pending registration, is under detention since January 23rd, charged with incitement of social hatred.
The court has also extended the arrest term for another defendant in the case over the incitement of social hatred. Public activist Serik Sapargali, poetess Aysulu Kadyrbayeva, who attended the hearing, was outraged by the authorities persecuting activities who help their own people. Serik Sapargali, together with his colleagues from Khalik Maydani coalition, supported the oil strike in western Kazakhstan, which served the base for his charges.
He was jailed because he was helping his people, because he was telling the truth to the authorities about the striking oil workers who were asking for their earned salaries.
Roza Tuletaeva, a defendant in the case over Zhanaozen violence, spoke of severe torture and humiliation she was subjected during pre-trial investigation. The woman was not even able to list all the atrocities she went through due to the presence of her family members in the courtroom. Following a petition of Tuletaeva's attorney, the court instructed the regional prosecutor to investigate the case and report back in 10 days.
A defendant, Roza Tuletaeva, an active participant in the 7th-month strike in Zhanaozen, has made a shocking statement. When being cross-examined by the prosecution counsel, she needed 3 attempts to correctly remember her date of birth. Later, the cause of her stress became clear. There was one swarthy guy, his name is Ruslan. He choked me with a plastic bag. It turns out that when the bag is removed, eyes bulge and person is unable to breathe for a while. When you start breathing fast, you get dizzy. They were choking me with a sack and it tore. Then they went to search for a new one. The second one was choking as well and also slapping and lifting me, grabbing my hair. When I entered the ward, I touched my head and I had a tuft of hair in my hand. I kept that hair and I still have it. I heard them calling me names and hinting at sexual abuse. They also told me my attorney Tashkimbayev will never help me as he could lose his license. I was to tell everything the way they instructed me, and they told me to give a confession after mentioning my children and showing their photos. Erlan Kaliyev, a member of Independent Committee Zhanaozen 2011, who was observing the act-out trial from the start, is shocked by Roza Tuletaeva's testimony. According to him, Roza is under major stress, she is heavily traumatized and requires psychological assistance. This Ruslan, a National Security Committee officer, and also Yerzhane, a criminal investigation officer, were putting a plastic bag over her head when questioning her. She had fainted several times then to get her back. They were pulling her hair so hard that following the questioning, she started to lose it in chunks. Because of this, Jusubayeva, an attorney, made a request for forensic examination to find out whether the loss of hair was due to illness or due to a direct physical impact. Roza Tuletaeva could not continue testifying due to the presence of her family members and her daughter in the courtroom. Quote, "I am ashamed to tell about what they have done to me. I can write it down if I may." End quote. The judge agreed with her arguments and, following the request of Gulnara Jusubayeva, her attorney, has instructed the Regional Prosecution Service to investigate the matter and to report back in 10 days. All the statements made here regarding alleged unlawful actions administered to the defendant shall be forwarded to the Regional Prosecution Office for investigation. The Regional Prosecution shall carry out an independent investigation and provide a decision on this statement. The cross-examination of Roza Tuletaeva lasted nearly all day. The statements made by her in the course of the preliminary investigation were read in the morning, following by cross-examination by the prosecution. The questions were mainly related to her statements made in the social networks, her SMS messages and telephone conversations. The very fact that all these records were made before December 16 means she had been under surveillance. This raises a reasonable question: if Tuletaeva was long considered a suspect who was actively plotting some rioting, where were the authorities and why didn't they prevent it? And that open question concluded the 15th of the day Zhanaozen trial.
Officially, the prosecution considers Roza Tuletaeva a leader of the unrests. She is also charged with communicating via internet with the leader of the Alga party, Vladimir Kozlov, director Bolat Atabayev and politician Janbolat Mamay. Tuletaeva's incoming and outgoing messages are cited as evidence.
On December 15, 2011, Roza Tuletaeva, who was protesting against the installation of yurts at the square, used an SMS service for sending following tweets to other protesters. Wooden shacks are installed, a yurt is placed at the square, may threaten the strikers. Thus, the investigation believes that these tweets were the call for mass rioting. Page 2. Besides calling for mass rioting on December 15, 2011, Roza Tuletaeva used an SMS service to tweet the following: "Or Allah, give strength to my people." In other words, she wanted the conspired crimes to go down as planned. Indictment, page 26. Roza Tuletaeva was an activist of the strike, which was initiated by the oil workers of Ozenmonay-Gaz. She was among the hunger strikers who were demanding a fair payment of their salaries. For her firm stand, Tuletaeva and her family was pressured by the authorities. Last summer, her daughter Aliya was arrested for 7 days. This was the result of Roza Tuletaeva's and Zhanaozen resident Nursulu Atarbayev's complaint filed against the worker of the Ozenmonay-Gaz, Damesh Sargulova. The women were accusing her of beating them. Roza regarded this as an attempt of the authorities to forced the activists to keep silent. Tuletaeva was criticizing the work of the local ruling party branch for inactivity of its representatives, with over 1,000 oil workers organizing a strike. Roza talked to the press, telling in an interview that the local authorities and courts are on the side of the employer.
The defendants in the Zhanaozen case revealed the widespread use of torture as interrogation technique during the questioning. Among the first was defendant Abdrakhmanov, who said he contracted tuberculosis because during the pre-trial investigation, policemen stripped the detained men, sprayed them with cold water, laid them down on the ground and then jumped up and down on their bodies.
Others charged with public disorders also confirmed that they had been tortured during interrogation. Parahat Dusimbayev, one of the suspects, says that he had been beaten. Another suspect, Maksat Dasmagambetov, went further and named the policemen who used violence against him: Kaldubay Awezov, Nurlan Yezbergenov, and Aslan Talibayev, Nurjan Jandarbekov, and Abdurasul Ateshev, the deputy head of Municipal Department of Internal Affairs. During the questioning, Dasmagambetov said that he sustained broken ribs and cold bladder and also had the entire body covered with bloody bruises. Galima Gileov, a member of the International Zhanaozen 2011 committee, has no doubts that the defendants were tortured during investigation. He has all the necessary documents to confirm the fact. The attorney of Talgat Saktaganov also made repeated statements regarding tortures. He filed a petition demanding to revoke all the earlier testimonies of his client. Moreover, according to Maksat Dasmagambetov, tortures were used and people were beaten. When we talked to Aynakul, a mother of 12, she showed materials of the medical examination and there was no reaction from the side of the law enforcement whatsoever.
Observers of the trial in Aktau demand to suspend the hearings due to numerous procedural violations. Well-known public activists made an according statement in Almaty on Monday.
For instance, Tanatar Kaliyev, whose testimony served as the ground for indictment of investigation on mass disorders, withheld evidence during the trial. The defendant said he was forced to confess under torture and threats directed against his son. The judge, however, keeps choosing to ignore these facts. Public activists are confident this stems from attempting to cover up the faults of the investigation. If the court continues to demonstrate prosecutive deviation, chances are the real perpetrators of the crime, those who commanded to open fire on civilians, will escape punishment. All the information was obtained through torture. There were numerous procedural violations. The order of precedence for the speakers, victims followed by witnesses declared on day one, was broken by the judge. Looks like all that is done for the purpose of correcting certain testimonies.
Family members of defendants in the Zhanaozen case also speak about police brutality and tortures during the investigation, directed against both men and women.
Back in February, we've reported about the detention of 2 young women who had to spend 3 days in custody. The women were afraid to reveal their names and speak on camera, but described what happened in the Zhanaozen police department after detention. He said he'd beat me and ordered to take off clothes. I took off my pants. Then he said that if I don't get naked, he would call riot policemen and beat me up. Then he took me to the bathroom. When I was in custody on December 16th, police officers took me away at 4 a.m. There's a bathhouse on the temporary detention ward and I was told to go there. They said to take off my clothes, otherwise they will call right policemen, undress me and mess me up big time. They took me out to the bathhouse and put into the opposite cell. I looked inside, saw the gore of people in underpants, children packed like sardines. There was no space. I was told if I want to dress, they'll put me there too. Everyone was shouting inside the cell. They were beaten. Even the guys screamed like women.
Zhanaozen residents Sainagul Zharieva and Zhenerke Yekdirbayeva have been placed under surveillance after they have arrived to Astana to seek justice. Both women have disabled children and both were on the list to receive state housing. Their names, however, simply vanished after 4 years of waiting.
We are on the list since 2008, the last year we were told that we are there. I have all the documents to back it up. In 2012, after December events, we asked the governor's office when our turn was, but nobody answered us. And then they said that we are not on the list and never were. Ainagul Zharieva, a mother of 3, says that her son was beaten during Zhanaozen riots, but she didn't file a complaint because it's useless. She asks only for what they should have under the law. Her husband is disabled as well and is under her care in addition to the child. She arrived in Astana with her son for medical examination and was shocked and frightened to learn she is under surveillance. What have we done? Why they keep an eye on us, but not to the criminals? Why ordinary people are under surveillance? I'm concerned about my child. If I die, I want to say that when we were going to Astana, Berdibek, Zhanaozen governor deputy, asked me to change my mind. He threatened me and promised to inform the governor. If something happens to me, the person to accuse will be Berdibek, governor, Turumov and prosecutors.
On Monday, recently pardoned human rights activist Evgeny Zhovtis presented his new book, Prisoner Notes. The collection includes articles, letters and appeals drafted while Zhovtis was serving his term. The author of the book noted that only a limited number of copies was published now, and it is yet unknown whether the book will be freely available in Kazakhstan.
Human rights activist Evgeny Zhovtis presented his work Prisoner Notes. Most of the materials have been co-written by convicted journalist Tokhnias Kuchukov. The book is rather rare because of the author and a limited run of just 100 copies. Interviews, letters and articles in a single publication serve both as a bibliography and human rights piece, with the main goal of drawing attention to the issue of Kazakhstan prisons. It was very important for me serving a sentence to retain my professional and spiritual integrity, etc. And this book preserves all that. When I was in prison, I kept on writing, fighting and defending the others in the same way I've been doing outside, but in much worse conditions. The materials of the collection refer to the period of his sentence in Usk-Kamenogorsk penal settlement upon Zhovtis and Tokhnias Kuchukov prison transfer, November 2009 to February 2012, when they were released on pardon. Associates and colleagues of the human rights activists attended the presentation. Sergei Duvan, a freelance journalist and the head of the Human Rights Bureau Information Center, was one of them. He is first-hand aware of the conditions in the local prisons. He spent 3.5 years in prison on rape charges. One of the best lawyers of the country was unable to fight the system. Legal scholars and lawyers who are here today tried to help me, but he couldn't do anything because what happens in prison is horrible. A person is absolutely nothing there. Aido Sadikov, the ex-leader of Azat and SDP branch in October, who was considered political prisoner just as Zhovtis, was also pardoned last weekend. In his first interview, Sadikov didn't focus on the prison conditions, but said that the arrest didn't change his views. My position remains the same. I'm a member of the opposition and I will tell you about my further activities in the nearest future. Those who attended the presentation stayed for a while after the end of the event. There hasn't been such a long queue for autographs in the press club for a long time. Zhovtis added his words of gratitude to the most of dedications. Public and journalists stood for him for so many times that referencing all of their works could make an entire second part of the Prisoner Notes.
A potential international scandal is reported in Astana. The city authorities are ready to take down private residencies to clear the place for the tallest building in Central Asia. When the police arrived at the scene to help the eviction, the situation took an unexpected turn as some of the residents appeared to be German citizens.
They had a bulldozer and crowbars. They came here with crowbars and were trying to break in. Galina Zhivalt is choking back tears. Only half an hour ago, she and her family were almost this house. The formidable-looking lot of city administration representatives, fire brigade, policemen, workers and even medical staff retreated only after the journalist's arrival. Galina has been living here with her family for 6 years. This is her destiny house, she says, while walking through the rooms. Everything was built by family's efforts. Now the city authorities offer around $700,000 for all 3 floors. The calculated amount provides minimum coverage, says Galina. The land plot was not even taken into account. It's just that nobody wanted us to assess the value of property. The property appraisal companies simply refused by referring us to the Tasmagambetов's company. They said that if they provide assessment according to the marketable value, they would be stripped of the license. The reason for this kind of reluctance is quite understandable. An international multi-billion contract is at stake. There is a sweeping construction unfolding right outside the Zhivalt's family's window. Under the president's will and dictation, the tallest building in Central Asia, the Abu Dhabi Plaza, will be erected here in 2 years from now. It will have a total of 88 floors and occupy 510,000 square meters. He's been a lifelong government official with billions on his account. The origin of the money is obvious. Andreas is talking about the capital city administration head. The man believes Immangali Tasmagambetov is to blame for the current situation. He says the Abu Dhabi Plaza building contractors confirmed that the money for compensation for demolished houses has been allocated comprehensively, while the city administration does not provide the total amount to people is one of the main questions. The citizens believe the money has been pocketed by corrupted officials. He wheedled additional financing to the amount of almost $1 billion for this project, as the construction is in progress. Of course, the private housing property hampers construction and thus must be demolished. Andreas Zhivalt and his little son are citizens of Germany. The situation with the eviction of foreign citizens in the capital of Kazakhstan has already received publicity in Europe. Angela Merkel said that if the rights of the German citizens are not protected, we will encourage them to withdraw funds from Kazakhstan economy. We expect representatives from Germany to arrive here to see what happened to those relying on local laws. The bailiffs promised to come back to the Zhivalt's house by the end of the week. Galina intends to phone around all the government agencies before that happens. She's also planning to reach out to the president himself, as 4 years ago at the meeting with gifted children, he was the one to promise bright future to her daughter Jennifer.
During the Monday's briefing in the Internal Affairs Department, law enforcement officers reported about their efforts in combating minor offenses. It looks like they took the recent message of the president about Astana's development to heart and now post record numbers.
It hasn't been a week since the president showed his discontent with Astana dwellers, as they don't seem to care even a little about the streets being clean. The police have responded with a raid, and the first victims punished for littering were 3 citizens who on April 12 were brought to the detention center. We spoke to people, and it's clear that a person will be stressed out if even he spent a day away from home. He'll be faced with inconveniences. He will definitely make certain conclusions for himself. The punitive measures are up to 15 days. Nazarbayev advised that the policemen start low and go slow. To recap, the president is committed to making the capital the most safe city in the country, he said at a conference on further Astana modernization. The president instructed the law enforcement not to skip even a minor offense, including dropping a gum on the sidewalk, take the offender's fingertips, fine them and arrest for 3 days. He referred to the United States of America as an example. New York used to be the most criminal city in the USA. The policemen used to put around 800 defendants behind bars, and when those minor offenses were eradicated, people realized that they are accountable for everything they do. Astana citizens have mixed feelings about the gum hunt. They say that making the streets clean is everyone's task, although such drastic measures are not the best solution. During the Soviet Union, people were arrested for 15 days for drinking or minor domestic violence, but a 15-day arrest for dropping a gum on the sidewalk is a way too much. The police should undertake more serious crimes rather than wasting their time on those minor offenses. It might be good for them. On the other side, someone will really contribute to making the city cleaner, and someone will only get rich from this endeavor.
Зарабатывать. Лучше более крупные держали бы и более стоящие эти.
I'd prefer if police address more serious and significant crimes like corruption rather than wasting their time on trifles such as dropping chewing gum. I personally think they are crossing the line. Chewing gum on the streets is not such a big problem. We have problems that are far more pressing and require urgent attention. The law guardians took the president's message with such a crusading zeal that it is expected that the last year's plan will be exceeded. To compare, 41,000 offenses were registered last year, whereas one raid alone over the last weekends revealed 2,000 offenses. If the policemen do not hold their horses, it will be the New York colleagues using them as examples.
The body of a 46-year-old man was found in the basement of an apartment block in Almaty last Thursday. The family of the dead claimed the man was driven to suicide by local policemen and city officials.
Forgive me, these were the last words Alimjan Kulintayev left to his wife before committing a suicide. The root of the story lays in 1990s, when Kulintayev's family had moved from Russia to Kazakhstan. They went through all: crisis, default, mass unemployment, etc. After failing to find a job of a motorman in railway industry, Kulintayev went to the market as a trader. Even though the income was not high, it was just enough to feed the family. However, the local police officer, together with an official from the Auyezov administration, used to extort money from the traders, say late Kulintayev's family members. Extorters beat Alimjan up should he fail to pay. The man was driven to a suicide out of desperation, says his wife. When I was heading home after work, I got a call from my children who couldn't say anything and were just crying. When I entered home, I saw them in the basement hugging their father. So this is what happened, and no one could ever imagine that the local police officer Yasulan is linked to it. First, the body of the dead was found by neighbors, who then immediately told his children. According to his daughter, Alimjan was in an unusually suppressed mood that day. I approached him when he came home and I felt he was behaving strange. Normally he would smile and talk to us. I asked if he was okay and if the trade was good. He replied saying it's not the life when you have to pay everyone, etc. Then I told him it was okay and not to worry, everything will be fine after we get home and relax. Kulintayev's friend Akmal Yuldashov used to work with Alimjan at the market but went bankrupt as a result of endless extortion by the local authorities. He said the local police officer always comes and asks for money every single day. Almost every day, the police officer, a young man, comes and takes away up to $8. I have no idea why he does that. He should protect people, not to extort them. Who is Officer Oraz, and does the local administration staff know him? Reporters addressed the question to the district deputy head, who replied negatively. Instead, the official spoke about fighting spontaneous trade in the streets and advised the family of the dead to file a claim with the law enforcement bodies. I want to outline that I have heard the arguments of these people, as supposedly he committed suicide because he was forced by the pressuring police officers and local administrators. I even noticed them mentioning some names. Since they do know all the facts and names, why don't they go ahead and file a suit with the law enforcement, who would certainly sort things out? Alimjan Kulintayev was the main breadwinner in the family. He left behind his wife and 3 children. Now the family members intend to hire a lawyer to instigate a criminal case against those who allegedly forced the man to commit a suicide.
Members of Kazakhstan's parliament accused the head of the anti-monopoly agency, Murat Aspanov, and the entire cabinet as an extension of tribalism and cover-ups. The reason for that was the recent rise of fuel and utility rates, which in turn lead to the increase of food prices.
An anti-monopoly agency has been nicknamed by the MPs a calculator of the oil and gas ministry. Such comparison was heard by the chairman of the Agency on Regulation of Natural Monopolies following his reference to the data by the oil and gas ministry to justify the latest rise of the fuel prices. However, parliament members asked the governmental official not to turn his agency into a calculator and not to follow a poor example of the chairman of the statistics agency, who was reporting to the MPs a couple weeks ago and was heavily criticized for false statistics and was given a nickname of the cabinet errand boy. Quoting the cabinet errand boy from statistics, meat 23%, beef 350, mutton 30%. Where did they get the 6-7% inflation indicator? They even dare stating that they use 508 parameters in the calculations. Who cares about these 508 parameters? Who is wearing diamonds and fur coats that are likely included in the 508 parameters? Murat Ospanov tried to justify both himself and the cabinet boy. Food manufacturers blow the price of food up, reasoning by the rising fuel and electricity rates, although the share of the above in food manufacturing is not so great. But the utility prices are also growing in price, and their control is the duty of the anti-monopoly agency, insisted MPs. So far, the agency covers for bad management, wastefulness and theft, especially by many parasitic organizations that cling to the suppliers of heating, water and electricity. What we have here, whoever wants to find snug jobs for his own family members in their service-providing companies can surely find those. But chief anti-monopolist would not give up. He tried to assure that he is just an ordinary consumer, thus diamonds and fur coats are nowhere near his shopping list priorities, and that he was buying the same groceries as everyone else. Regarding food prices, I do my shopping like everyone else. I feel the rising prices as well. I had been working in the province before, and there the food is cheaper. It's probably a bit more expensive in Astana. This ordinary consumer with a minister's salary was also trying to cast off his link with the suppliers of goods and services. He stated that by raising the fuel price, his agency managed to quench the appetite of the oil and gas ministry. Allegedly, the department of Saud Moyanbayev had requested to raise the price of fuel and lubricants by a sequence higher against the established prices. He also stated that the further rise of fuel price is inevitable, while lower prices would cause fuel deficit, which is in turn might entail social tensions.
Kazakhstan's electronic tendering system is imperfect, says Pavlodar Regional Financial Police representatives. Not long ago, they've arrested a criminal group charged with the theft of $70,000 through the state procurement website.
The criminals' plan was quite straightforward. They started by registering a limited liability partnership and later placed price quotations on the site of electronic state procurement on behalf of the legal entity. If their company won a tender, the con man would get a down payment for the contractor but never fulfill the contractual obligations afterwards. During the half a year, a con artist managed to score 10 contracts from various state organizations, including several departments of the emergency ministry, as well as education and medical institutions. In total, the caused damage to the state budget is estimated at around $70,000. The e-con men are now facing fraud charges. I believe this happens because our state departments are improving their work practices and making a transition to electronic government. Those state procurement practices are meant for simplifying the purchase procedures and eliminating corruption elements, although some criminals are taking an unfair advantage of that.
On Sunday, the weekly news recap program of the KTK TV channel once again showed the video of an alleged questioning of a suspect in the case of the failed terrorist attack in Almaty. The man in the video confessed that he allegedly was a courier and transferred money for the associates of the exiled banker Mukhtar Ablyazov, namely for journalist Igor Vinyavsky, politician Vladimir Kozlov and staff member of the Golos Respubliki newspaper Guzel Baydalinova. Journalists are skeptical about the charges, saying that they are likely a part of a well-thought-out propaganda campaign against the opposition.
I believe this is another attempt to shut down the newspaper by all possible means, even the most ridiculous, vile and unpleasant ones. In my opinion, it is very difficult to tolerate being slandered and accused of deeds like terrorism, which involves loss of lives. I think linking us to the terrorist attack is ridiculous. What surprises me most is that this is stated with all certainty on the KTK TV channel. They made us assign a gag order, but KTK appears to know everything, as is happy to share information. In my opinion, all they want to do is terminate the newspaper, thus keeping our mouths shut. I believe they want to intimidate people and promote the trend of terrorist threats. This is a scary subject of interest all over the world, which makes it so easy to frighten people. In my opinion, it is like an agony similar to the Stalin's actions during the peak of his rule strengthening. It is happening in Kazakhstan during Nazarbayev's authorities' decline. If these actions are being taken personally by the president, then it is happening close to the end of his rule. But if it's done by other people just to compromise him, then we may expect a rise of another political regime, much worse than that of Nazarbayev. It is about clearing the political battlefield from opposition so that the authorities can establish universal rule, excluding any sort of dissidence. However, they don't seem to realize that like-mindedness is an indicator of lack of culture, while non-conformism is quite natural appearance. This is a democratic state after all, but now Kazakhstan finds itself in authoritarian, totalitarian culture, and we can observe all the signs of corresponding culture everywhere. Authorities are trying to threaten everyone. They want journalists to be afraid of being imprisoned, exiled, executed, etc. at any moment.
Terrorism is also at the center of the plot of the first film, and CIS bought directly from the producer. Julien Leclerc's L'Assault, The Assault, will be shown as part of the upcoming French Film Festival in Almaty.
According to the event organizers, the audience can expect 7 well-known films and the premiere screening of The Assault. Some of the filmmakers and actors will even take part in live Q&A sessions. According to the film distributor Bauzhan Shukenov, Kazakhstan's movie distribution market is not well developed yet. Therefore, the new acquisition is perceived as a new stage of Kazakhstan's movie industry's development. This issue had reached even our field, so we decided that our viewers may also be interested to see how different people react to terrorism in different ways. We always need to learn about the subject, see how it happened in France or other countries, to be prepared to handle similar situations. This is not strictly politics, but also a part of social development as well. We would like these kinds of things to be reflected in what's on the screens of our movie theaters.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching and goodbye.